Welcome to the Mama Mudra podcast. I'm Kate Thompson-Duwe, and I believe that the wellness industry has a joy problem, so we're aiming to fix it. This podcast is where we bring in experts to challenge beliefs and tools to feel good, stay consistent, and build a life that works. Because in this community, joy is the new performance metric. Welcome back to the Mama Mudra podcast. Today's conversation feels like a foundational one. We speak a lot here about wellness, about hormones, about biohacking, about music, about mindset, training, everything, and we will continue to do so, but I thought it quite important to stop for a minute and ask a really important question, and that is, what is health? Is it a set of protocols? Is it a list of instructions? Is it a set of routines that we copy from someone else that we think is doing really well in that area of life? Or is it something far more personal? I'm sitting with Dr. Simone Silver, who is someone that I'm really, really excited to have here with me today. And she's spent many years working at the intersection of wellness, hormones, longevity, and medicine. And instead of narrowing this conversation to one of those, we're actually zooming out. The episode is entitled The Artistry of Health, which is a title that came from Dr. Silver, which is how she approaches her work. And the reason that it's referred to as artistry is because it's so individual to each person that she works with and is so unique to each of us that it's that important to understand how that is, how she finds out how unique each one of us is and how many things go into understanding what makes up the artistry of our individual health. It's not mechanical, it's not one size fits all, it's layered and dynamic, very, very much individual. And it's really important to understand that our capacity for happiness, which is what we discuss here, is so deeply linked to our health being optimal and knowing what it will take to reach that level of optimal health. Simone, I'm so excited to have you here. It really feels like this is the foundation for a lot of other things that we're going to discuss in the series of episodes. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. We'll jump straight into it because we've got a lot to discuss. And based on previous conversations, I think we're very good at discussing. So let's not wait. So if we start at the highest level, what does it mean to you to say that health is an art form and not just a science or an approach? Why and what do you think people are missing when they treat it as a formula or just a checklist?
So this is really the underpinning of my experience of my entire career. So, you know, being trained in medical school, we are trained in a very specific way. We're taught to think in silos. We're taught to think in terms of symptoms and think in terms of patterns to make the diagnosis. That is the role of the doctor. And there's place for that. But for me, there was always more. There was always, what about connecting the dots? Or is it just my role to provide a diagnosis? What about this concept of healing? What does that really, really mean? You know, I really went in, as naive as it may have been, but I really went into the profession with the desire to really understand humanity and to understand what healing meant. So these were all the questions that I was asking even then. And then as I went into practice, the frustration started to build around being boxed in, so to speak. So fast forward 14, 15 years of experience, of questioning, of learning, of endless curiosity. I think I would explain that the science of the medicine, the science of health, is vital. It's important. It directs us. It guides us. It gives us credibility and clout into decision making. But the way in which we apply that science cannot be uniform, and that's where the artistry comes in. So there's a certain flair and a certain wisdom and a certain curiosity and a certain integrity that I feel a physician, a clinician must possess, or anyone in a health provider space, in order to journey with the patient deeper. Because again, what is health? We're going to explore a lot of that today. But what does it mean? It's different for different people. And so the craftsmanship and the artistry is part of it.
It's so interesting. And I said to you when we first met that I feel like it almost, I would imagine it almost feels like you need a new degree every time you meet a new patient,
Yes,
because
exactly.
it is that personal. And it must be so fascinating to have that level of information, that you have studied and learned, because it can be so confusing for someone like me that knows just enough to get confused. I'm not ignorant enough that I just don't know anything, so it doesn't bother me. I know just enough to know how little I know and how many rabbit holes I could dive down if I so chose.
Correct.
And to try and understand which rabbit holes are more important than others. We live in this protocol culture of, morning routines, 5 a.m. wake up, sunlight in our eyes, grounding outside, no screen time, don't have coffee, have this first, and there are just, it's never ending, cold plunging. And then some women say it's so bad as women, and then some say it's so good. And it's just supplement stacks, all of these different, and I am one of those people that loves to try all of these things. And some I know I absolutely love and they work for me. Some certainly don't. But why is that? What is happening under the surface that something that I try and that really works for me, that makes me feel alive and phenomenal, I will then bring my friend along to and say, you've got to do this, it's amazing, and they will have the complete opposite result. What is that? Why is there not more of just a blanket approach? And I know I'm probably asking an enormous question here, but why is it so specific that, there's so many nuances to our reactions to all of these protocols?
Correct, exactly. There are so many nuances because that is the nature of who we are. That is the nature of who we are biologically. We are all biochemically different. We are all hormonally different. We are all genetically different. So the complexity and the richness of each individual is true. It's a truism of life. Then you layer over that the complexity and the individuality of our psychology, of our spiritual belief system, of the culture and community in which we inhabit. And suddenly you're dealing with an incredibly diverse ecosystem per person. Then we try and take something complex like health or creating balance, and we try and apply it over something as complex as that, and we can't, because we can't protocolize it. We can't stock standard it. It doesn't work. And we have many examples of this. If we look at traditional medicine, it is absolutely remarkable in how it manages acute scenarios like a heart attack or a fractured bone. The advances have been unbelievable in terms of AI and tech. But we're still falling short when it comes down to prevention. How do we actually prevent chronic processes, degeneration, and disease? And it's because things start to become more complex. And I think true to what you said, and it is a massive question, we can unpack it for days. As we ponder these complex things as human beings, we want to find answers. That curiosity and wonderment is fantastic. But we tend to latch onto things in a simplistic way. So I think we just need to be aware that information can be incredibly extreme on both sides. The pendulum often swings. This is good, this is bad. That's hardly ever true. The truth is often somewhere in the middle, and we often, I think we just need to apply that skill of finding the middle ground, finding the voice of reason. Integration is my word of choice. Integrating different schools of thought in a way that makes sense scientifically and from a human point of view.
So if someone were to walk into your office and say, I'm not feeling myself, there's something off, I have no idea what it is, I'm generally rather a healthy person, I do all of these things right, my nutrition is good, where do you start? Because of the fact that there are so many of these different facets and elements. You're obviously going to start with, I would imagine, a blood panel, but are you starting with, and I'm genuinely interested in this because of the fact that I touch on so many of these different areas, and it's always something that I think about, which of them is the starting point? Well, this is the starting point. But like, what follows on? Are we then going to brain health? Are we going to gut health? Are we going to hormone health? Are we going to blood sugar levels? Are we going to nutritional well-being? Are we going to sleep? Like, what do you start with your patients that don't really know what's going on? There's just something a little bit off.
So it's a great question, and might I just add that as patients, when we often don't know where to start, is it sleep, is it nutrition, is it stress, is it my hormones? Funnily enough, often clinicians don't know where to start, and that's also why we end up in quite a confused culture. So there is a kind of mastery that the clinician must have to guide a patient on a journey in a way that is constructive but clear, because we also don't want to get overloaded and go down every single rabbit hole available to us.
And it also gets, sorry to interrupt you, it also gets bloody expensive
Absolutely.
If you start trying to fix all of these different areas at once.
Correct. So again, that is such a skill. It's such an important skill. And I'll use myself as an example. When I first started in integrative medicine as a young, very naive clinician, I wanted to fix every problem. I wanted to correct every single blood test that I was seeing. And I wanted to prescribe a gazillion supplements to do so. And I laugh at myself now because it's absolutely not the way. But in my naivety and my desire at the time, that was the way I thought it had to be. Fast forward many years, a wisdom comes with experience, and you realize not all answers belong in supplements, not all answers belong in medications, but sometimes they do. And that again takes us back to an artistry. Also crafting a journey. So where do we start? And how do we proceed along the journey? It looks something like this. You said, do we start with blood tests? I say, let's start before blood tests with really good listening. Because we must understand that blood tests, for example, provide merely an insight into health. We cannot see everything about health through blood tests. They can be very helpful and assistive. But actually, the body is a remarkably intelligent thing, and it speaks to us all the time through symptoms, through messages. We just need to attune and hear. And most of us, because we're living in such a state of automatism, we're not hearing, we're not listening to our bodies. So there's a skill in the clinician to ask the right questions, to dig deeper into the patient's experience. I don't like the word symptoms, but experience is a good word, to really start to understand what's going on. Then we might go and explore some blood tests. But again, as I've grown older in my profession, I've come to really love this word judicious use of testing, judicious use of supplements, because we need to be judicious. Otherwise, it's unsustainable. Financially, it's unsustainable from a practical point of view, and overdoing things can often cause harm. So we go back to this principle of the middle ground is so important.
It's so interesting to me, and I think I've just come up with a business idea for you. But take it, don't take it. There almost should be a level of training, and not medical training, because obviously not everyone has the time, the inclination, the finances, whatever. But like, if there were some kind of a training specific for parents, probably for moms, because the amount of times I think to myself, when something is going wrong with my kids, and you have that moment that you're like, am I at the stage of going to the doctor? I don't know if I have the time. I don't have an appointment. I've got so much else going on today. But is it serious enough that I should? And then you do, and it's just something really generic, and it's just an over-the-counter or whatever it is. If there were a training, a basic training, not just first aid, that one could do to understand how to listen, because it is so clearly that the doctor almost should be the partner that you work with at the stage of it getting serious enough that you need medical intervention, and understanding that based on where you are from a health perspective, this is the intervention you do require, and that you can't obviously prescribe as an unqualified, individual. But they're not the person that you're going to with the basic questions, because we should know that if we know how to listen. But at the same time, don't over listen, because then you run into the realm of becoming hypochondriac, and then everything is actually more serious than it actually should be.
Exactly. So again, you highlight an example of that pendulum that can swing into two extremes. One where we're over-analyzing our bodies and becoming neurotic about it, and the other, which is we're just not paying enough attention, or we're not taught to read cues or to listen properly. And I love the idea of learning, and anyone can do this, learning a literacy, learning to read your own body. You know, it's vital. We talk about self-awareness all the time. So we need to have an awareness around physicality and an awareness around emotion if we want to master ourselves and life. So we talk about mastery in life. Master thy health first. Start with something you can see that's physical, that's tangible. And so we build from there.
And especially for our children, you know, I think that, I mean, not especially because our own health is paramount, but for children that don't yet necessarily know how to communicate things.
Correct.
I find that often with my youngest child, the ability to explain what's going on isn't always there. So you kind of get these, you know, sort of descriptors that you're like, I'm not quite sure what that could be, you know. But it's exactly that, almost trying to understand the nonverbal cues and realize what they could be symptomatic of, as opposed to rushing straight to, because even with a doctor, you know, if they're not listening to those cues and just listening to the one sort of blanket, you know, description potentially from a younger child that can't explain it that well,
sure,
they could also be prescribing the wrong thing.
Sure, but it works the other way. So as well, meaning that while we want to foster insight and literacy into understanding cues and symptoms, even for our children, we don't want to miss red flags. And as doctors or clinicians, we're trained to recognize red flags, which is why emergency medicine and acute medicine will always have its place. It's not necessarily the responsibility of us as layman mums. I mean, for example, I'm a mum of 3 just like you, and I don't treat my own kids because I'm not a pediatrician. I'm not fluid in the red flags of the health red flags of children. It's not my area. So we mustn't be shy either to just ask for help or go to the doctor, rather it be a waste than we miss something important. So again, we've got to look at
a balance.
It's a balance. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And tell me, how do you think what is the impact of experiencing the focus here ultimately is finding a pathway to happiness, using wellness, using longevity, using biohacking tools once we have the foundations right, all of those wonderful things that we have available to us, in order to find happiness as the end goal, as the driver, as opposed to, you know, being the thing that we eventually come upon one day once everything else is aligned,
Exactly.
you know, kind of using it as one of our tools. But how much are we impacted by our biology in the way that we feel happiness? So even if I have the most positive mindset on earth, but my health isn't great, is that going to impact how I feel happiness?
Absolutely. We cannot drive this message home more strongly. We have the science around mind-body. It's so clearly established. So we often talk about how thoughts affect the body, but to your point, the state of our health, the state of the body can affect our happiness, can affect our thoughts. And we've got many examples of this. We now understand that physical health through things like neuroplasticity, you know, the brain's ability to change its structure, its function, its neural networks, is one of the interfaces of the mind-body connection. We now understand this about the gut. If you're eating poorly or you're very stressed and your gut microbiome changes, you're going to have a shift in your neurochemicals through the gut-brain axis. So it's a bidirectional relationship. If we're not healthy, it's very difficult to be happy. And if we're not happy or we're not exercising mastery over our emotions and thoughts, it's very difficult for the body to be healthy. Absolutely.
Yeah. With all of the, you know, I mentioned biohacking just now, we obviously are living in an era which I find very exciting, but going back to the balance that we spoke about just now, it obviously has its pros and its massive cons. with the movement towards longevity and optimization and just how much there is out there. As a medical professional, how do you recommend that we balance taking ownership of our health and being responsible, listening to the cues, making sure that we are living our best lives and becoming completely over-obsessive and just jumping down every single one of those rabbit holes that I mentioned earlier? Yeah. Because ultimately, you obviously can do harm if you're doing too much.
You can.
How do we know? And again, I think I'm asking these enormous questions of you just over and over and over again, expecting a one-sentence answer. But how do we, what does this responsible approach to our own well-being look like in practice, considering everything there is available to us?
Considering all the glitz and the noise and the lights and the information, how do we navigate through that into truth and responsibility? I love the word responsibility that you used, and I think it's more critical now than ever because we're so exposed to information and we're so exposed to extremes of thought. So we each need to find our own middle ground, and you don't have to do it alone. This is where a partnership with a clinician can be really useful, just to bring in that voice of the science. So one must remember that anyone with a health professional's degree has a set of ethics and duties. So there's a responsibility and an accountability attached to that. So it's useful to listen to information that is coming through credible sources. So the first thing I would say is whenever you're listening to information, who is speaking? What is their credibility? What is their level of education? But what is their accountability? It's very different along different spheres of careers. Some people can say anything they want because there's no accountability. So listen carefully and understand who you're learning from. And then apply common sense. We would know that foundational things like nutrition, like sleep, like judicious use of supplementation in the right way would make sense. Anything that's very faddy or extreme or that hasn't been proven, it's not to say don't do it, but proceed with extreme caution, and watch and wait. I often use this approach in my own life, where I see something interesting coming up and the science is not there yet, it's emerging, and I watch it with curiosity and I wonder where it's going to go. It doesn't mean I need to go and inject myself with it tomorrow, because we can actually cause a lot of harm and we don't realize that.
Yeah, it's very, I think it's indicative of a culture that just wants and is used to quick fixes.
Correct.
And I know that a lot of people are on the fence with regards to peptides specifically. I admit that I jumped right in both feet first, and I still am a huge fan, and I think that they're incredible, some more so than others. Some I tried and won't do it again. But I have spoken to, in one of the first episodes that we recorded, I did an episode on peptides, and it's still by far the best performing episode. And everyone seemed to think, going back to your point just now about the credible sources, everyone seemed to think that I was this peptide expert, which I most certainly am not. And that was one of the reasons for doing this podcast, was to bring the experts in their fields, on this journey with me, to prove that I don't think that I'm the expert in any of these fields, but I do know enough, as I said at the beginning, to kind of, ask the questions that I think a lot of people are thinking. But the amount of questions that I got when people thought that I was this peptide expert, that showed how people want to ignore the foundations. They want to ignore the areas that require hard work and consistency and, day in, day out doing the right thing, and they just want the quick fix. And I think that that's probably where a lot of the potential dangers come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it explains so much about, it's just human nature and the culture in which we live, and instant gratification and wanting to shortcut. And, not everything has to be slog and hard work. There are ways. So we go back to the concept of personalised medicine. If I'm seeing a woman who's got 2 young kids and she's exhausted, am I going to sit there and preach to her about her nutrition and eating 7 portions of fiber in a day? No, because she's going to get properly rageful with me, and I've been there and I didn't have the bandwidth there. So it's not to say, it's not to say that we always have to do things in the formal and correct and hard way. And it's about being adaptive, but being sensible. So there are things that we can lean on for support that help us. I'll use the metaphor of we don't have to always climb the mountain. We can take the cable car up. There are things that we can do, but they still need to have a measure of responsibility and first do no harm.
Yes. Yeah. So that segues beautifully into this next question, so thank you. If listeners walk away from today's episode with one thing, one outtake that they remember, what would you want it to be in terms of becoming more literate with their own biology and taking control of their own well-being? What would that one foundational thing be, considering how many things we've discussed already?
Sure. I think I would distill it down into stop, pause, because we cannot listen, we cannot hear unless we stop. We are so busy running and thinking and running, and we're becoming more fragmented, more scattered, and further away from ourselves and our truths. And I think this is a huge cause of unhappiness, is this fractured sense of not belonging to yourself. So I often think, how do we go back there? And it starts with a really good pause and a stop, because in that there's space to reflect, there's space to quieten down, there's space to go, oh, I've got a niggle in my left toe. I didn't notice it because I was so busy running. And that could be picking up the start of something really important. So we've got to stop and tune in.
I think it's great advice. I must say, as you were speaking there, I was like, you're speaking directly to me and thinking about that in my daily life. It's one of the hardest things one of the most profound pieces of advice, but one of the hardest pieces of advice to take on.
Correct.
But so true.
But a discipline, no? Like,
yes.
We go back to the discipline of exercising and taking a supplement stack.
Totally.
We need to actually schedule in the discipline of quiet and reflective stock-taking time.
So in closing, and I feel like we could carry on for hours, as we knew we would, but for today's episode, just to close off with one final question. If health really is an art form, which is the way that you approach it, which I love, and I think it's so true and so such a beautiful analogy as well, what would it look like for each of us to become our own artist, to be in charge of our own, curating our own tapestry of well-being, where, again, I know you said you'd start with the pause, but kind of how would you even come up with the concept of your own individual piece of art and grow from there?
It's beautiful. So if we use that analogy, the first thing is to realize that you can become your own artist. So this is where I would like to see medicine evolve. And we spoke about doctors and patients being more in a collaborative co-partnership relationship rather in a paternalistic, disempowered one. So we must feel empowered that we can, in fact, become the artists of our own health or life canvas. And take up the brush. Find the inspiration to take up the brush for yourself. No one is going to save you. No one is going to fix your health for you. It is entirely up to us. And then in the pause and in the stop moments, really think about what that canvas might look like, because we can't start painting unless we know what it is we're aiming for. So again, what does health mean to you? It's different things for different people. What does that canvas look like? What does it look like today? What might it look like in your 60s and 70s? How do you want to age? What are the things that are important to you? Is it more brain health? Is it more preserving your muscle mass because you love playing paddle? We're all different. Let's get really, really clear on those priorities. So clarity, understanding, envisioning what it is you want to paint, and taking up that brush are so important.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for today's conversation. I really think I was excited about it, and I knew that it was going to be fascinating, but I think that your approach is so the right one in this day and age towards well-being, but in a medical, light, because it does very easily become something that just feels a little bit sort of off limits, and we just blindly listen to what we're told. But ultimately, we're all human. Even those of us that are significantly qualified can make mistakes, and there has to be an element of partnership.
Of course.
So I think that it's really important to push education around that. So thank you. In closing, I hope that everyone enjoyed listening to this. I hope that it reframes everyone listening's approach toward their own well-being, and as opposed to just chasing trends and listening to every single thing that we are told, or every trend that we see, or every influencer that is feeling amazing because they tried something brand new. There's nothing wrong with all of these things that are out there. I think it's really exciting. As I said, I'm the first to try new things that appeal to me, but there has to be an element of first understanding ourselves and understanding our needs and what we're aiming towards, as opposed to just going in a million different directions because we can. And I hope that this encourages people to become curious about that. Try and map out your journey and where it is that you're going. Understand that this is a dynamic journey. It's not a static one. It's always going to be changing as we grow, as we age, as our needs change. Let's just make sure that we're aware of how deeply personal this journey is. Let's also be sure that we're aware of how important one's health is with regards to finding happiness, and be grateful that we have partners like Dr. Silver around, just to know that we can't possibly know everything about this journey, but we certainly know ourselves better than anyone else. And I hope you enjoyed listening, and if you did, please like, share, tell all your friends, and thank you very much for the time. If this episode shifted something with you, share it with someone who needs it. Because the wellness industry doesn't change from the top down, it changes through conversations like these. So subscribe, and stay close. We're not chasing wellness anymore. We're redefining it through joy. See you next week.